the next speaker, I don't need to introduce him. It's Dr. Martin van der Leek from Onderstepoort. And Dr. van der Leek, we're looking forward to your presentation on the things that vets actually can do wrong as well. Okay.
Trying to get my video turned on, but no success. All right, so this is a little bit of my life story. It contains some veterinary medicine, some philosophy, nutrition, economics, philosophy, and it's been a fun experience. So why is it that we might have unintended consequences? So you all remember, or my students do, that I'm a TMR guy. And as the herds get larger, there are time constraints and numbers constraints. And as students, for sure, we definitely get focused in the moment on our PDs or our calf, PM, whatever we're doing, and we don't necessarily see the big picture. So you don't have the situational awareness that will help you in the future. So what are some of these things? The law of diminishing returns, when doing more isn't more. So somebody in the audience will recognize this program. It was a fresh cow program that was introduced 30 years ago, I'm going to guess. And it is, in one degree, very valuable. But in another degree, if you had people that were not trained, for them to go through this procedure took 5 or 10 minutes per cow. And that's just not acceptable. What you need is a cow person that can walk through a group of cows and recognize those that need to be examined. So how much time must cows stand? Does cows stand there and wait while all these things are being done? And I'll get to marginal milk later, which I've discussed with my students, because that's what you lose when cows are standing around for no reason. And this happens too when all new gadgets and treatments, and people have issues, so they want to try something new. If you look at the slide here on the top right, at one point drenching was really popular, and you can see it's done with a pump, or you can put a sump pump into a little barrel. And I had one of my clients who killed 6 cows in 1 week, drenching, trying to solve the problems that they should have solved in another manner. SOPs, that's to simplify things, make sure that everybody understands. Synchronization. I think we discussed it in room 511, but which client might you suggest should do synchronization? And when you're a young veterinarian, it's quite easy to decide that the herd that has poor reproduction and poor management might be the one to benefit from synchronization. And in actual fact, that's not the case. So you can see the different synchronization programs and what their cost is and what their labor is. And look at the calculation at the bottom. So this is a synchronization program with 4 things that have to happen. So they got 98% of the cows for the first shot. They only got 75% of the cows for the second shot. It was the weekend and it was relief people and they didn't get all the cows and they didn't care. And for the rest, the program was the same. We'll look at the end result. Only a 63% success on the one that was messed up and 80% on the one that wasn't. Moving steam-up cows. When should they be moved? Should they be moved individually? Should they be moved as a group? Dairymen have different opinions about this. Cows are managed in a socially stable group throughout the pre-fresh and carve in the free pre-fresh, almost like raising pigs. So do you move a group at a time? And I've also discussed that often is that small dairies are very difficult to manage compared to these bigger dairies because you can actually make separate groups. And this I won't discuss. This is just a comparison of the pros and the cons of the way that you decide to move your cows. Maternity pens. I am not a fan of maternity pens. It's another one of those issues. The calves get navel ill, they're not doing well, they spend 20,000 Rand, they build a maternity pen, and it never gets cleaned. And they're right back where they started. So I actually prefer cows to calve outside, and I don't consider mud as infectious compared to a bacterial culture in a maternity pen. So, getting a sense of how long cows should milk, and this speaks for itself, especially for the profit period. And this is really what I want to get to. How often should cows calve? And are longer lactations better than shorter lactations? And it's quite clear that a cow that calves more frequently during its lifetime will have increased milk production because she spends more time in this high area of milk production. Now, what is the risk of that? What can go wrong? The problem is calving risk. So every time a cow calves and goes through transition, there's a risk that she can have an issue. Every 1 day of increase in days in milk, you lose 0.08 kilogram of milk. So that also comes into play. Calf diarrhea outbreaks. This is also one where I stubbed my toe. So you'll have a dairy that has a large calf diarrhea outbreak. Everybody, and I mean everybody, I mean all the calf employees start treating, tubing, in the hutch, out of the hutch. And what has actually happened? They are now spreading the bacteria all over the place because they're over-treating. Another thing they do sometimes is replace bedding on a daily basis. And once again, you're dragging bugs all over the place. And they don't have one dedicated person to treat the calves. So in more than one situation that I've been in, we stopped treating the sick calves, trying to break the cycle. So that's a moral question, I guess, or a welfare question. But would you rather sacrifice the really sick ones and save the rest, or do you want another 20 or 30 to get sick and die? Case definitions. You're talking to a client on the phone and they say they've got this and they've got that, and you don't go check what they're talking about. What's a stillborn? What do they call a retained placenta? What do they call metritis? What's a high SEC? When does a cow actually have a fever? These things you need to be on the same page when you communicate with each other. Placebo treatments. This one I found very valuable because there is an intense desire to do something. And in most cases, they will get the phenidine, they will get the antibiotics for cows that most likely don't need it. And in that case, I have had clients use vitamin B complex on a regular basis, and everybody feels better because they did something. And in actual fact, vitamin B complex will never be a disadvantage. Save a heifer, break the bank. These prices are a little bit outdated, but what I'm referring to is especially with sexed semen, you now have a lot more heifers. And especially somebody who starts breeding with sexed semen doesn't take into account that those heifers must go somewhere. They need more hutches, they need more pens. Plus, they don't realize or don't remember that it's going to take 1.5 years before that heifer pays back. So that makes for a dilemma. What do you do with all those calves? So I think Chris raised this, that in the USA, custom heifer raising is very popular. You will raise your calves till 4 months old. They will get brucellosis vaccinated, and then they go off to a heifer raising facility. This is a feedlot in Plainview, Texas, that holds 30,000 Holstein heifers. The reason they go to Texas is that there's something called cotton burrs, which are very cheap, provides a source of roughage, And so raising the heifer becomes cheaper then. How about nutrition? Fresh cow rations. This is something that has been discussed with a lot of owners. They decide that a fresh cow ration, they might get DAs, so they add more hay on top of the normal ration. So in actual fact, the energy that the cow needs, or that the fresh cow needs, is then not available because there's extra hay. The other thing they do is put hay outside of the TMR. If I see a round bale in a fresh cow pen or in a steam-up pen, I freak out because it just really shouldn't be there. We spoke about the moisture of rations. That was Kenneth, right? If the moisture content in the ration increases, it weighs the same, but the cows are getting fewer of the goodies. So moisture measurements are very important. Beware of owners that adjust their rations themselves. You get the ration from the nutritionist, everybody thinks it's fine, something goes wrong, all the cows have diarrhea for a week. All happened because the owner adjusted the ration. This is just my little view of the rumen. The way I'd like to feed a cow is box B. But when you're feeding a high amount of forage, that better be digestible forage. I'm a fan of high forage steam-up rations. So you can see that the low energy, high fiber rations, that the energy balance for the cow before doesn't drop as severely and pretty much maintains itself after carb. So Kenneth also mentioned this. We're talking about a ration with, say, 5 kilograms of straw in it. The only hassle is that it's difficult to manage. So many people have tried this. They didn't execute it properly, and they will never try it again. And what are the things that might have gone wrong? Well, the first thing is that that straw wasn't chopped to a short length, 2.5, 3 centimeters. They didn't add water to the ration, because if you don't add water, all the grain that you're putting in there will just sift out to the bottom of the feed pump. And this becomes critical when you're also talking about your DCAT minerals. So this is, well, that's my opinion, but we also demonstrated it, that it's almost never profitable to feed a low cow ration. We did an experiment with 300 cows per group, and the group was paired by days in milk, by parity, by pregnancy, and there was no difference. They lost a lot of milk on the low cow ration. Now, of course, you can argue what is a low cow ration, and it depends. I don't mind if people remove from a ration the expensive minerals for a short while, but certainly don't mess with the basics of the ration. So it almost becomes a fulfilling prophecy. They have low milk on the low cow ration, and the milk goes lower. But what's the important thing when you're having this discussion, or when you're thinking about that, is that cows must get pregnant so that they don't spend a lot of time late in lactation. The assumptions are that the cow's dry matter intake will stay the same, but it really doesn't because of the higher NDF content. You've now done another move, so you have that stress, and you're also making an assumption that cows will stay on the same lactation curve. So you can go onto a dairy, and if you suspect this, you can look at the lactation curves, and you will actually see that dip when cows are moved to the low cow group. Sorted rations. Be careful to walk onto a farm and you see a lot of long fiber and you go make a big deal about a sorted ration. In most cases, farms that have sorted rations have already adjusted their ration to account for the sorting. So if you force them to process the forage, they're going to eat it and the milk will drop. So just be aware of that. So this doesn't look so good, but it might work okay. What I also wanted to say, and maybe I have it later, but also watch out for empty bunk syndrome. You arrive on a farm at 7 o'clock in the morning and the feed bunks are empty. And you run off to the owner and you say, what the heck are you doing? Your feed bunks are empty. But they are following the feeding strategy of feeding to an empty bunk. They believe that if cows finish the feed, if they are fed within 1 or 2 hours, that will be okay. It's not the ideal, I agree, but don't get stressed out right away. Incentive programs. Incentive programs sound so obvious, right? Why wouldn't you pay people more if they're doing a great job? It's not as simple as that. So here's Milkarella Dairy, and we're looking at the somatic cell count. So they started off with 300,000. They instituted an incentive program where they would get an extra $5 a week if they dropped it by 500. So they work and they work and they work and they get it dropped here. Now the bonus becomes normal. It's not really a bonus. They just get it every month. There's really no reason to work for it, and that's okay. And then all of a sudden it rains, and the somatic cell count has a huge jump. What are the employees going to do now? They're going to say it rained. They're going to say it was Bob, it wasn't me. So now they figure out what are they going to do now to solve this problem. And what's the easiest way to solve a high cell count problem in a herd? You put more cows in the hospital. So if you want to do an incentive program on somatic cell count, you must balance that with the number of cows for mastitis that are in the hospital bed. Who's the best breeder? What do breeders usually brag about? They brag about their conception rate. And we discussed pregnancy rate, did we not? So this guy is very selective, absolutely certain that a cow is in heat, and he will breed the cow. This dairy breeds anything that looks like they're pregnant, get a lower conception rate. I don't have the formula here, but I think you will understand that from both of these formulas, you can actually get the same number of cows pregnant. So it's a question of philosophy. You rather want to breed anything that looks like it's in heat, or do you want to only breed the special cows? But can you see when this breeder talks to this breeder, it'll be an interesting conversation. This is not from veterinary medicine, but it's very true on dairies or any business. And it also follows through into the fact that when you go onto a dairy, you might identify 5 things that need work. You then go sit down with the owner, you say, these are my 5 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the owner says, no, 1's not a problem. There's nothing to worry about. And you're going to have to live with that. And in many cases, it's because they want to avoid the issue. It's just something they don't want to talk about. So you then need to agree to deal with some of the other issues. So eventually you can get to the issue that's financially most important. Ownership. Also a lesson, hard lesson that I learned. You cannot make recommendations or write SOPs without taking ownership. You cannot go home from a farm visit, sit at your computer, write out the program, go back the next time and hand it to them and leave. That just doesn't work. And who gets the blame? You will actually get the blame. It means buy-in from everybody. Owners, employees, consultants. And I think in Rugby 511 we spoke about communication with employees and native languages. Employees are incredibly important to you as a consultant. Unfortunately, I'm busy losing my Spanish. This might also include time which you're not going to bill for. You might have to go all your herd runs, and then at 6 o'clock before you go home, you quickly stop at the dairy and see how things are going. And once you get the cycle right, then you're on your way. Culling. Doc, I'm not selling that cow. Can you work out what that one is? So cash flow is king and marginal milk. So what do I mean by cash flow is king? What I mean by there is they have to buy feed, they have to pay employees' salaries. And can you see that every 1 kilogram of milk is worth X, especially so if it's marginal milk. So if they tell you they have a cull rate of 35%, are you now going to say, yeah, that's really not good, it should be 25 or even 40? And the high cull rate can actually be the result of excess heifers due to using second semen. And that way cows can be pushed out of the herd. They can be sold as milk cows, not for slaughter cows. And you also can get rid of bad traits, some chronic disease, so that you improve your herd. So what do you need to check? You need to check whether the facility is filled with cows. Seemingly unprofitable cows contribute. So here's a herd that you go do your PVs at. Here's a chronic lame cow. She's not in pain. She walks funny. She's giving 15 kilograms of milk. And you're like, why don't you sell that cow? Well, the reason they're not selling that cow is she produces marginal milk and cash flow. Another classic situation would be a cow with very bad udder conformation. It's like you can't understand why she's there, but there's a good reason she's there. Is she profitable? Right? Does she make milk to cover her feed cost? So in a marginal sense, you don't say is her milk income better than the total expense of housing and feeding her. It is only the feed cost. And another question might be if she's just a disruptive cow. She bullies, then she might just have to go. So this is also a slide we see quite often. And this is the importance of culling within the first 30, 60, and 90 days. And we used to refer to these as voluntary and involuntary culls. I think that makes sense. So involuntary cull, you don't have a choice. Whereas your voluntary, you make the decision whether the cow's going to go or not. And now they're referred to as forced or biologic versus economic culls. Overcrowding. So this is also one of those realities. Yes, it's not good to overcrowd. You're going to end up on a dairy where there's no option but to overcrowd. Alex discussed this yesterday, the importance of the time budget. So overcrowding happens for two reasons. Overcrowding happens because people want to increase the size of their facility. And so they're busy buying cows or calving more cows to put cows in the new facility. The biggest reason for overcrowding are periods of poor reproduction. So you get heat stress, cows don't get pregnant, the heat stress passes, and all of a sudden there are a bunch of cows that are pregnant. Now the steam-up pen is too small, the fresh pen is too small, and it's something you will just have to work with. And for housed cows, right, there are many factors involved in that. So this was interesting to me, is that if you do have an overcrowded pen, let's say you're at 110% or 120%, you would think that cows that are coming out of the parlor are going to go feed. That's the first thing they want to do. But indeed, that's not the case. They go for a bed before they go for feed. And the importance, I think Alex mentioned the same number, 1 hour of resting time, 1.7 kilograms of milk. That is substantial. Sand remains my favorite. It's most people's favorite. There's often a complaint that sand is expensive. Yes, it is. And sand might not be available. But what you should use is either building sand, washed building sand, or river sand. And there will be the complaint that the sand messes up their pumps. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing that beats sand-bedded stalls. Feeding time. So this is interesting. You'd think that cows that eat from a rail, if you look at the right-hand side of the picture here, are going to do better than the cows on the left-hand side. And that's actually not the case. Because what the headlocks do for you is they prevent the cows from bullying each other as much. I don't have a photograph, but there's a newer version of a headlock, which is a plastic flexible upright post, which has the same intent. So if it's overcrowded, they eat fewer meals, but they eat faster. So what do you think is the consequence of that? You're really messing with urine pH. Urine pH, with rumen pH. Then you must take into account whether the facilities are 4 rows versus 6 rows. So for those who will come on the elective rotation, you will see barns that cows are housed in. And in a 6-row barn, there are 3 rows of cows on either side. So the very, very back row has a much more difficult time coming to the front. What else do you think happens in a 6-row versus a 4-row with the same number of cows? In a 4-row, the feed bunk space increases. So, the repro effects of overcrowding. Quite impressive. So what do I recommend? For more cows, you can go up to 110%. And I'm talking about the 4-row. Transition cows, you go down to 80 or less. I've been on very few dairies that have built enough space in their transition cow pens to accommodate only 80%. So here we get to marginal thinking. And this is just a scenario. You might say a cow would have higher maintenance intake. But by eating 1 kilogram more, the cow goes from 24 kilograms to 25 kilograms. The cost of making this 1 kilogram here is only feed cost. Because this area, the initial costs are paid, for the feed wagon, for the employees, the facility payments. So average feed cost, pretty much useless because it includes maintenance. We need to know the cost when they're making more milk. And the profit for marginal milk is regardless of making or losing money. So can you imagine how important that is for cash flow? So if we go back to where I started in this presentation with those cows that were in the crush, is that any time that you keep a cow away from feed, you're losing profit. So if you're milking at 4 o'clock in the morning and you pull out cows that need to be AI'd, they get moved to a pen alongside the dairy. And at 11 o'clock, somebody comes to AI them. That's nuts. Look at what we do as veterinarians, right? Cows need to be examined rectally examined, but we also need to be aware of how long the cows are away from feed. So this is the same principle of marginal milk. In this case, it's just stocking density. So if a facility is built for 550 cows, then you should milk 550 cows. Those extra 10 cows, their milk is going to be the value of the feed cost of marginal milk. Knee-jerk reactions. I would say that it's a personality thing as well, but I've done pretty knee-jerk reacting in my life, and it doesn't always work well. My little thing about averages: monitor averages, manage outliers. That's Martin's mantra. So be very careful of averages. So look out for outliers in the dry and the steam up. Right? They might have been lame, so they're skinny. They might have got pregnant late, so they're fat. Urine pH, they might have put dry cows in the steam up pen 2 days ago, and they haven't acidified. Off you go to the farmer and you say, oh, I found 5 cows that don't have a negative pH. Well, they're going to laugh at you. I discussed sorting in empty feed bunks. Before you draw a conclusion, make sure you keep looking around and get the right information. Appreciate the impact of relief feeders and milkers. Something goes wrong, you don't realize that Wednesday the regular feeder was sick and the relief feeder was feeding. They never do as good a job as the original guys. Thursday, Friday, all kinds of things go wrong. So think about milkers and feeders. This is a big one for me: data entry and understanding how the data works. Does it have momentum? Does it have lag? And is it biased? So we discussed, right? So momentum is intercalving period. You can't calculate the intercalving period until a cow is calved. So the effect from intercalving period is seen way later. The example of lag is, let's say in the case of making a change in your steam up pen with the idea that it would improve your reproduction, you will have to wait, right? And what might happen in a situation of lag is you get a weather change from one group to another, and then it becomes very difficult to monitor. Monitoring on dairies is incredibly difficult because there are so many factors. What is benchmarking? So in benchmarking, you're comparing your data to other farms. Fun to do, but it can get you into trouble because the facilities, the management style, the feeds are not the same. Monitoring is looking at those parameters on your own farm. comparing yourself to yourself. So this is the newest issue that we deal with, and that is the increase in automation. Right? It's amazing what we already can detect in milk and with sensors. What's the problem with that? That data must be managed. And there's tons of this data. So I'm familiar with a farm that purchased a ear tag system. For more than a year, it wasn't used properly. And eventually they started using it. What does it mean? You need to go sit at the computer. You need to print a special list. More than anything, you have to make sure that all the cows have the sensors and not just some of the cows. So this is almost a bit like the synchronization programs. It doesn't always solve the problem. So take a step back, keep looking. What's the latest joke with my core rotation? Awaken the inner Sherlock Holmes. Keep learning and say, I don't know easily. And this is my last slide. So this is the question or the discussion I had with Kenneth. So my pathway was one from veterinarian to managing herds. Once you manage a herd, you know how important nutrition it is, so you want to be in charge of the rations. Once you're in charge of the rations, you want to know how the stuff is grown, so it's the best quality. And then on the right-hand side, with the blue arrow, there you now see how somebody like Kenneth, how they come in the other direction, and somewhere in the middle we meet. So these are tables that are at the end of the presentation. Dairy Management Consulting is a South African company. Right now there are two gentlemen. They on a monthly basis go to, I'm not sure how many farms they're doing right now, but it's about 20% or more of the country's milk. So look at some of these differences between the top 10% versus Holstein TMR. 8 kilograms of milk. Look at this pregnancy rate. It's huge, isn't it? Huge. So what do we want in a palpation pregnancy rate? We want greater than 70. So a 60 just won't cut it. Now you can take a look through those because this will be in the slides that I share. So there are your cows less than 50 days in milk. Almost a third in the top 10% of herds. Age of calving for heifers, 23 months. So 23 months is now the accepted age at first calving. You can push it to 22, but then you're taking a few chances. Look at the difference in conception rate. The age at conception. Obviously, they have to be a younger age to be able to calve earlier. And therefore, mortality in the first 4 weeks. Then this adds to stuff from Alex, just for information. So the different minerals. And then at the very end of the presentation, I've got these tables of limits or goals. And it's quite a wide variety of them. Well, we're going through them. Elian, I am done, nice and early.